few thoughts I guess I'll share with you first, and then we can maybe open it up a little bit more informally. But first of all, again, thank you for coming down. I think this is a very exciting time to be in the Tucson Police Department and also for the community. Look, making organizational changes and addressing budget challenges, particularly at the same time, is never easy. But I think the long-term health of both the police department and really the city overall does require us to be both smart and strategic when it comes to how we utilize limited resources. And like most units of government these days, we have limited resources. So I think we put together a plan that reduces spending, but it also improves both officer and public safety. So I'm happy to be able to talk to you a little bit about that. I really want to be clear, though, first and foremost, that the organizational changes that we're making are related to what my executive management team and I in the department, so that's the assistant chiefs, several captains and myself, these are things we really believe are the best way to provide police services. And we think the changes that we're making are going to make our department better and more effective. So let's start a minute talking about staffing numbers. Instead of basing our budget on a wildly inflated and frankly unrealistic number of sworn personnel, a number of officers that we can't afford to properly equip, train, or to supervise, not to mention a number that we haven't even come close to for years here. We are now talking about a budgeted number of officers that we can appropriately support and build on for the future. And that's really something, a level in the mid-800s. Our new deployment of more officers into patrol assignments actually puts more cops on the street than what we've had in the past or currently. And I think it's going to help us reduce response times and improve officer safety. It just makes sense to really beef up our patrol efforts, and that's what we're doing. And it's also allow us to be more effective in terms of our community policing efforts. One of the things we're also doing with this plan is to assure that there are lieutenants, patrol lieutenants, working throughout the city on a 24-hour day, 7-day-a-week basis. And we think this is important so we can provide leadership, appropriate supervision, and reduce liability. We've really never had enough patrol lieutenants working a cycle around the clock, and that's going to change, and that's going to be a good thing. Now, the decision to move about 70 sworn personnel from their current assignments within various specialized units around the department was not easy for any of us to make. These officers have been doing great work. They are dedicated, capable members of the department. I want to make it clear that, okay, maybe a couple of them are working behind desks, but the great majority of them are working assignments that are linked to investigations, in some cases gang activity, domestic violence, a variety of things. They're doing important work. So the idea of moving them back to patrol wasn't a choice that we made lightly. But at the same time, I'm very confident that their skills and knowledge, what they've learned through working with detectives and in these special assignments, is going to be really helpful in their new patrol assignments. Now, all of us are making some sacrifices to put this plan into place and to make sure our new structure works. For example, even in my office, the chief's office, we're transferring 2 of our outstanding lieutenants back to patrol, and I'm holding off for at least a year to fill the deputy chief position. So we're all in on this. This isn't just one group of personnel in the department. Now, part of our plan, as you may have heard, involves decentralizing some of our activities, such as moving some of our investigators out into the districts. Many property crimes, for example, are committed by offenders who are, used to doing what they do, committing their various crimes in specific areas of town. They operate in a zone of comfort where they feel most familiar and comfortable, whether it's doing break-ins or stealing cars or whatever. So I really believe that assigning detectives to particular geographic districts is going to allow them to work even more closely with our sector officers. And this is going to result in information ultimately being shared. I look at this as a force multiplier. And this is not uncommon in a lot of cities our size, to decentralize detective services. So you have detectives working in different parts of the city, closely aligned with the patrol officers and the community service officers in those areas, and also becoming more closely aligned with the neighborhoods in those areas so that they're really familiar with what's going on. I think that's going to allow us to be more effective in solving and preventing crimes. We're also decentralizing our traffic officers. So our motor officers, our traffic officers, for the most part, really need to be working in the sectors to focus on areas and neighborhoods that need the most attention, such as where the greatest number of accidents occur, or where we have particular concerns about the safety of children, pedestrians, bike riders. We've had some really serious, some awful accidents recently, and we need to be able to focus the combined attention of our sector officers and our traffic officers working together with neighborhoods on the areas that need the most attention to improve traffic safety in this community. Now, I'm very pleased and confident that our new staffing numbers are going to finally allow us to purchase and or lease new patrol vehicles. If you've seen some of our cars, you know we're talking about vehicles that haven't been replaced in years. Some of them have as many as 150, 175,000 miles on them. That's just crazy. We got to have vehicles that are safe. This is the office that patrol officers use, and it has to come up into the modern age. So we're finally going to have some resources that allow us to replace those vehicles, much needed. We're also looking at some other changes that this funding will allow us to do, such as more functional, climate-appropriate uniforms for officers. Cell phones, for example. Our cops need to have cell phones that allow us to be more responsive, both to neighborhood concerns, and also allow us to come into kind of the modern age when it comes to sharing crime data. A big portion of this reorganization is going to lead to what we're calling real-time crime center, which frankly Tucson is overdue for. And that's the ability to really track crime, push information out about hotspots, about key offenders, use the best and most appropriate technology to do this. So we're sharing information with all of our officers, including our detectives, our officers working in the sectors, our officers in specialized units, and so forth. And I guess the last piece of where we really need to dedicate some funding is to ongoing training for all of our personnel. It's not enough. You don't get just trained once to be a police officer and then you're good for years to come. Ongoing training is critical, especially in this day and age. Now, one of the things I like most about the plan that we're putting forward and that I think bodes best for the future is that we are finally setting aside dedicated money for 3 specific police academies in the coming year, and then more beyond that, so we can continue to hire and set the stage for increasing our overall staffing levels. I don't think 850, 830, whatever it is in the 800s is probably going to be adequate to meet the city's needs into the future. I think we can reconfigure the numbers now so that we're more effective with what we're doing, but I think over the long term, as the city continues to grow, we are going to have to add additional officers to the department. I think by setting aside money for academies and planning to do that in the coming year, we're setting the stage to start bringing the numbers up, and then as the economy hopefully improves, we're in a position to strengthen the department overall and maybe get those numbers back higher into the 900s, which would be great. But let's be clear, we're not in that range right now. We may have an authorized staffing level that says we're at 992, whatever it is, but we're nowhere near that. And that number counts folks who are in the training pipeline. So that's not even officers who are out there on the streets working. And that's why I think the way we're doing the number calculation now and budgeting for it is a lot more honest and accurate and reflects what we're really able to provide to the community. So I'm very excited, I really am, about both how community members and members of the department can be involved in implementing this reorganization effort. Look, like any plan of this size and scope, there are bound to be some things that we've missed, some things that we can do better, things that are going to need to be adjusted as we go along. I like the fact that we have an engaged community that's saying, well, what about this? How's this going to affect my neighborhood? I love that officers take pride in what they're doing and are saying, what is this going to mean for me and my work going forward? I think all of that is incredibly positive. But I'll be the first to admit, this is going to be a work in progress. You know, it's sort of one of those where we're building or fixing the plane as we're flying it, and that's just the nature of police work in a city these days. But I think the steps we're taking reflect what we realistically have the resources for. I think they allow us to finally properly train, equip, and deploy the cops we have. And I think it sets a high priority on the patrol function, which really in a healthy police agency is where the bulk of the resources should be allocated. If you don't have enough officers to make the calls or to make them safely, and we've seen some recent incidents where officers really felt, and appropriately so, that their safety was compromised. The first step is to assure that we are taking officers perhaps from other assignments and putting them in patrol where they can provide that core service to the public and also provide safety for each other. So I think we're moving in the right direction, but again, it's a work in progress. We've been as transparent as we can about this plan. It's not ideal that it's sort of linked in terms of timing with the budget, but even if we didn't have the budget concerns that the city is facing right now in front of us, these are still steps that I would want to be taking and that, you know, I think show the right kind of priorities as we move forward. So I'm happy to take any questions that you all have.
Chief, I talked to a retired officer earlier today who suggested that if you take some of these guys out of the specialized positions and move them on patrol, it could have the effect of aggravating your backlog because the patrol guys take the initial report and some of these other positions did the follow-ups that actually cleared the cases. Is that a valid concern?
Well, see, I look at it a little differently. First of all, I think that patrol officers are some of the most capable and can be some of the most dynamic crime fighters out there. The idea that we have a group of officers who are just sort of basically assigned to be patrol takers or first responders, and then it has to be handed off to someone else, I don't really think is the best model for providing service or engaging the talents that our officers have. I like the idea of officers having greater ownership and attachment to a particular neighborhood, getting to know what the priorities of that neighborhood are, focusing on the crime issues and the problem people in that neighborhood, and then working collaboratively with detectives and others to do what it takes to solve the crimes, to prevent the crimes, and to be really more engaged in looking at that neighborhood in a holistic, smart way. This is a model that's worked extremely well in a lot of other places. I know in the city that I came from, it's one of the things that helped transform us from one of the most violent cities in the country to a community that was much happier with the public safety resources that they had, even though they were scarce, like they are here. And I think what this plan really does is it says, we have confidence that our patrol officers can also be good investigators. They can be doing some of this same work that some of these folks who were doing the follow-up pieces were doing, if we have enough of them out there. And that's a key piece of what we're talking about.
Fair to say you had this in mind before you got here and got your deep dive into the budget?
I would say that I'm fortunate that I've had exposure to several different cities around the country, and also the work that I've done with the DOJ, the Department of Justice, has given me access to sort of policing models around the nation. So I've been able to look and see what's working and in some cases not working in a lot of different places. But I wouldn't ever try to come in to a department like Tucson and impose some ready-made template for what works or what doesn't work. I've been spending a great deal of time in my past, albeit short 45 or so days here, talking to officers throughout the agency, talking to our command staff, working really closely with my outstanding assistant chiefs, and getting feedback from community members about what sort of policing they think makes sense for Tucson. And one of the themes that I've heard over and over again is more resources need to be put towards the core function of patrol. If we're really going to be community oriented and effective in crime fighting, we have to strengthen our patrol function. And that's one of the things that we're doing with this plan.
Chief, there have been some concerns about recruitment from some of the senior officers feeling that if you lose some of these incentives, everything that they've worked for these number of years, what sort of nugget do aspiring officers have to work toward? And it's no secret that this agency's had difficulty filling some of those recruitment classes in the not too distant or not too recent past. I know that you'd like to have 3 distinct dates where you're doing this every year. How realistic is that? What are we going to change that's going to recruit more people and continue to bring people in when we've had a difficult time doing that already?
Well, first of all, I think one of the things that draws people into any agency, especially if they're a young aspiring potential police officer, is the opportunity to do real crime fighting and to be more engaged with residents at the ground level when they come in as patrol officers. So I think strengthening the whole role and function of patrol is going to be attractive in and of itself. Because, look, if you have enough cops assigned to a patrol district or a particular sector within a district, that gives you the flexibility to let some of them do some undercover or surveillance work sometimes, to do some plainclothes work with the community, perhaps around prevention, to take some extra time in trying to solve a case, not just pass it on to somebody else. That's really rewarding to police officers, and I think that's a very attractive model to work in. No one disagrees that Tucson police officers need to be better compensated, and that's something that as the city moves towards a better position of fiscal health, hopefully will be right at the top of the agenda. That's certainly something I'm going to be pushing for. But given the resources that we have now, I think one of the best things we can do is make this the job that most of our folks are doing as rewarding as possible and providing them with the necessary equipment, resources, training, supervision that they need to do it. No one wants to be out there without an adequate cover officer on a call. No one wants to be driving a car with 180,000 miles on it. Folks don't want to be wearing uniforms that were designed for, Chicago or New York, where it's cold a good portion of the year. I mean, and people shouldn't have to use their personal cell phones when they're interacting with the public or trying to do police work or follow-up. I mean, these are pieces that, to me, are just common sense that will, in fact, allow us to attract more people, because this is a great place to work. It's a dynamic, exciting community to be part of. I think we've got a lot of the pieces that will allow us to continue to attract good candidates here, but I do think we have to shore up the core patrol function.
Chief, you said that you've been out there and you've talked to your officers. What has been their response to your plans, and especially the ones that were, had special assignment where it's actually going to end up costing them money?
Look, I wouldn't be truthful with you if I said that, you have somebody who's making an extra 5% based on some special assignment that they've been working and now they're coming back to patrol. Are they necessarily happy about that? I get it. I understand that they're not. But let's face it, what has happened in the past, not unlike in many communities, is that this process of giving so many different assignments and positions a 5% pay differential has really been sort of a backdoor way to give pay increases. And frankly, it's not been a very equitable way to do it. There are a lot of officers who are working very hard out there, and just because they're not one of those 60 or 70 cops that's been into one of these special assignments, they're not getting that 5%. Yet, they're working their tails off out there. I think that, I appreciate the work that group of officers has been doing, and I believe that as we put this new plan in place, they'll have opportunities to bring a lot of those skills out into the patrol force, to share them, to teach them, and to be doing a lot of them on a sector district basis. But I don't think that that's the best way to model a police department when you are really significantly understaffed in your patrol function. Right now, people are waiting too long to get a response from officers. And it's not the fault of the officers, that's just, we just don't have enough staffing out there. And in some cases, officers are making calls by themselves that they should have a cover officer for. That's just unacceptable from my standpoint. So what we're doing is saying, look, let's be realistic with the resources we have. Let's use them appropriately, as we regrow the department, which I believe we can do in the future, perhaps we can move some officers back into more specialized assignments. We're certainly not taking anything away from our detective units, and in fact, I'd like to grow some of those detective units going forward. That's a legitimate promotion that people can aspire to, and if there's more pay that goes with that, I think that's completely appropriate. But I think these are some changes that we just need to make at this time.
How are you going to get to 830 sworn officers? Does this require layoffs, or can it be done through attrition?
So we're actually much closer to that right now than you might think. But it does not, one of the things I'm happiest about with this plan is that it does not require any layoffs. It occurs very gradually through attrition. And at the same time that we have attrition, we also have a process to actually fill a number of these key positions, at least in patrol, through the academies that we have scheduled in the coming year. And we're finally setting aside money specifically for those. Right now, we're in a situation where, who knows if there really is money for those academies. There might or might not be, depending on how much money is available through position vacancies, and that often gets swept away, as we know, to meet other city budget needs in other departments, or for the general fund overall. So what this plan does is it locks down essentially the money that's needed, not only for the academies that are coming up, but also for the ongoing training that cops really need to have to do their jobs. And frankly, you asked the question about recruitment and retention of folks. A big factor for many police officers these days in terms of staying with the department is the ability to know that they're going to get ongoing quality training. That is a huge plus, and I want to be able to assure that that's something that's available to our personnel. They deserve that, and the community deserves that.
Does your plan discuss or at least address the idea of sick leave, sellbacks, and senior command staff having take-home vehicles? Is that something that you're considering at some point of reducing or scaling back?
Well, I think some of the issues in terms of sick time are really bigger than the police department. Those are larger city issues that frankly are going to have to be addressed by the city manager and by the executive leadership team of the city overall. And look, as I said before, I'm not suggesting this is the end-all be-all of plans. This is a work in progress. There are pieces that we have not fully looked at yet, but we're going to continue to explore as we move forward. I'm very interested, for example, in the whole area of police accountability when it comes to crime fighting. But it's not even fair to try to hold people accountable to crime on a geographic basis when we don't have adequate people deployed in those areas, and we don't even have a mechanism for really exchanging crime data. One of the things I'm excited about that we're going to do is we're going to have a couple of sergeants assigned to our communications center, not to supervise the dispatchers, that's already happening, but rather to help triage calls, to be able to eventually gather more data about incidents that we're responding to in advance, so the officers know, for example, what they're going into, if there are existing warrants out there, if this has been an address that we've responded to repeatedly, if these are folks that are involved in other criminal activity. We're really looking at just being smarter in terms of how we use both technology and our human resources going forward. And I think ultimately it's going to strengthen the department.
Chief, it's a continuing sore subject for citizens who, if they have a case where, say, a burglar has come and gone,
Right.
officer never shows up, they say, file a report online. It's a real sore subject for people. Do you ever foresee the day where you're going to get away from that method? Well, would this help?
Yes. So it's not acceptable that people should be filing burglary reports online. Property crimes are rightfully one of the largest concerns of residents in any community. And my intention is that we take those types of crimes very seriously. In fact, this is one of the reasons why I think our burglary and various property crime detectives need to be assigned geographically to specific districts. I think that even though we're still going to set up processes where they all have the ability to communicate with each other, it's really key that they be linked with the actual sector officers, so that we can provide members of this community with the best possible service when it comes to investigating burglaries. One of the things that cops know, for example, is that if you can solve one burglary, you're very likely going to solve a whole group of them, because you know, individuals that are doing one, they're doing usually all of them in a neighborhood. It's one of the reasons that if you've been a victim of a burglary, it's very likely to happen again, because if we don't catch that individual, they already have some comfort level about the neighborhood, about your home, they may come back. So I want to put together the resources that allow us to really make a difference when it comes to these property crimes. And I think we can do it, but it's going to take some flexibility on folks' part, some creativity, some shifts in existing resources, and some patience from the community as well when we go through this transition. But yes, I think we can get to a much better place in terms of our service level around property crimes.
Chief, on the subject of.
I think you were next, go ahead.
Thank you. I just need it clear in my head. City Manager Michael Ortega approved this plan. Does it go to the council now? Can it change, or it's staying as is? The council has a say, no say?
Well, of course,
I don't understand that.
sure, yeah, and it is complicated. I'm not even sure I fully understand how all of this works, because, you know, the council ultimately has to approve the budget. And they're the ones that, you know, have the opportunity to look at every aspect of really any department's budget proposal and make a decision about what they're gonna fund, what's gonna be held back, maybe what might be done differently. But look, my job, appointed as police chief, is to make these kinds of decisions and recommendations about how we should be deploying the police department resources and how we move forward. That's what I was hired to do. There was no mystery. You know, I said, look, this is what I see as a priority coming in here, and that's what I was told that the community was ready for, was the ability to use the resources that we have to provide the best possible police services. And that's what I've tried to do with this plan. I'm sure this won't be the end of the discussion around it. The council will be able to weigh in. Of course, the city manager and I have already talked about it extensively, and he's been very supportive. I've had conversations with individual council members. I think they get it. We can't keep kicking the can down the road financially. We have to figure out how do we do the best job we can when it comes to public safety with the resources we have. But no, I'm probably not the final word. Really, the community is the final word on it, I think.
The subject
Go
of
ahead.
merging the two downtown and west divisions.
Yes.
This is a two-part question. So, number one, is there a timeline on when they can expect this to happen? And also, you know, the entertainment district getting created. And then two, how would you address concerns from downtown merchants who think this is gonna lead to not only slower response times, but also, you know, they like seeing patrol cars out there. They think it's a deterrent for crime. And if you take away those patrol cars and replace them with bike patrols, they're worried that that won't be as an effective crime deterrent.
So I'm a little mystified, frankly, how anyone would get the idea that this or any other plan that we've talked about involves taking away patrol cars or diminishing our presence in the downtown area. That's really never been discussed. We understand that this is a very special downtown. I've had the opportunity to visit with and talk to a lot of downtown business owners and merchants, and I'm 100% committed that we need to provide absolutely the best possible police service to, you know, build on the progress, certainly not diminish from it that we've already made. What this does, I think, will ultimately provide stronger service and a greater police presence in the downtown area, not the reverse. There's nothing in this plan that suggests that we're not going to have patrol cars going through downtown. We will definitely be maintaining our bike and foot patrols there. Boundaries of the actual downtown, or what we're calling now the district, will be maybe changed just a little bit, but even that I see as making very little difference in ultimate service, because we're going to be strengthening the number of officers in the area surrounding the downtown. So to the degree that there are neighborhoods that need greater attention, they're going to get it.
How about the rest of the city? You mentioned about moving officers back into patrol.
Right.
How much of an impact, and the rest of the city.
Well, and that's of course cuts to the core of what we're trying to accomplish, because right now we know this is a far-flung city. I mean, there are areas that are really geographically separated pretty substantially from other areas, and so our hope is that we can really look at crime activity, needs of particular neighborhoods, the geography of neighborhoods, and assign officers appropriately. Let's just even take the example of Rita Ranch. You know, that's quite a ways out, but there's a lot of homes there. And those are taxpayers. Those are folks who want police services. They've been frustrated even to some degree at, recent break-ins that have occurred. I want a situation where there are officers who are geographically assigned to that neighborhood out there, who work that on a regular basis, who know what's going on, who build relationships with the residents, who can focus in a thoughtful way on prevention, who can provide better response. Will all of that happen overnight? No, this will be a transitioning process. I mean, the question is, how fast will any of this happen? Well, it certainly won't all roll out at once. There will be pieces that happen over probably the next month. We'll see even more over the next 60 days. And my sense is the larger full extent of this deployment and reorganization will occur by the end of the fiscal year, which is really end of June. Some of it, of course, is just challenging because, you can take detectives that may have been working here and want to put them out in various patrol districts, but we got to figure out workspaces for them, right? So those are, or even how we provide cars for people, different things like that. This is a work in progress, but I would say the bulk of it will happen over the next 60 days, and some of it will take as long as the next several months.
Chief, you've laid out staffing levels for the future, but how many cops does TPD have today?
We have, right now, roughly 880 sworn officers.
But
And
in
so-
your memo, you said you'd be down to that many at the end of June.
So,
with
no, what I've
six
said
retiring
actually
a
is
month.
we'll be down to the mid-800s, 830 to 850, over the course of the next 18 months. There will be a gradual, as academies come and go, because we have them scheduled throughout the year, our staffing levels will shift slightly, but we will never get below that 830 level. And my hope is we will never even get as far as that point if we can add numbers to some of the academies that we're planning. So
Does that
we are-
current number of 880-ish count anybody who's in the academy right now?
No, this is the point. We want to be a lot more accurate and honest about counting folks who are in the pipeline. In other words, we've hired, but they're going through training process, whether it's academy, whether it's FDO program, versus officers that are, able to be deployed out there on the street themselves taking calls. And so the whole point of this reorganization is to say, look, this is the number of cops that we actually have working, and then we are still budgeting separately from that for officers that are going through the training process. And we can keep those two distinct, but have the money set aside to do that training function. So I think this is really more about being forthright about the resources we have. There's no question. Look, I'd be the first to say, and I think members of council would probably agree, as I know the city manager would it be nice if we had more police officers in the city? We've just gone through a staffing study that I think is going to suggest we probably will need more as the city continues to grow. But this is what we have now. This is what we can have. This is what we can afford. And it's not unlike, your situation at home. If you have, if one spouse is unable to work, perhaps because you've maybe had a medical situation going on at home, you've had unexpected expenses with your kids, you may have to make some changes in what you can pay out for a mortgage or what you can afford to do as a family. That's the kind of reality that we all face on a day-to-day basis. Police department isn't that different. We have limited resources right now. I want to be honest about what they are and then use them in as smart a way as possible. So if we have, 800 some officers, let's at least then make sure we have the amount of money that we need to properly equip them, to train them, to supervise them, and that we have a plan going forward to increase our numbers to a more acceptable level. And that's the challenge. And
We've
it's a big
been
one.
we've been talking a lot about sworn officers. How do these plans affect the civilian employees of the department?
Well, of course, they will affect the professional staff of the department. We are really incredibly fortunate to have such an amazing team of professional staff in many levels of the department, some of them doing analysis work, some of them doing communications work, crime lab that's probably second to none in the country. That's incredibly important. There will be some minor adjustments in professional staff. For example, we're looking at adding some staff now as we move towards more body cameras, public records requests, transparency to the community. It takes a lot more resources to handle those kind of requests and to process that sort of information. So we're looking at adding some professional staff that can help us with that. That then also frees up our sworn staff to do some of the things they need to do. So there are going to be different pieces of this that involve, as you say, both professional and sworn. I'm not sure we figured out every aspect of that yet. We're fortunate we have a group of folks going through our Community Service Officer Academy coming up here. Those CSOs are incredibly helpful. We'll be assigning them geographically as well to work with the officers in the various sectors and the detectives. I think they can play a big role in prevention activities and other things. So the bottom line to me is this is an exciting time to be here. And I think this allows us really to move forward. I think a lot of people have been saying we need to make some changes. We're not sure what they should look like, but we know they need to happen. And okay, so we've laid out a plan, and I think this moves us in the right direction going forward.
Chief, we're trying to get a better handle on whether it's a reduction or elimination of the mental health unit when you see the role that has in shootings.
Yeah, absolutely not a reduction. The mental health unit is going to continue. I mean, we have a MISS team, as it's known, is incredibly important here. It's setting a standard nationally that we're extremely proud of. Our commitment to how we work with folks who are mentally ill or who need special services is going to remain very strong. Exactly how that's configured in terms of its engagement with patrol and investigations may change slightly, but its overall strength is going to remain the same.
Because I thought I saw a reduction of a couple positions in the memo.
Not for mental health, I don't believe.
It says 2 officers from MHST.
They're being
will be
backfilled
moved,
detectives.
returned to patrol.
Yeah, I think the officers that are there may be going back to patrol, but their places in that unit will be taken by detectives. So there are a number of different functions. We're not, we still have detectives that are doing gang work, domestic violence work, obviously mental health work, and we want to strengthen our investigative team going forward. But officers who are doing some of these different jobs, they need at this point to go back to patrol, and then we go from there.
Chief, of the 880 in the department now, commissioned officers, department data says there's 373 on patrol. So with the changes, can you give me a rough estimate how much that number will go up on patrol? 373?
Yeah, I probably can't. I probably have to get back with you with more specifics about that. We know that roughly 70 or so officers who are in special assignments will be joining that group of folks assigned to patrol.
Okay.
But some of that's not all patrol officers. For example, in some cases we've had lieutenants who've been in other assignments that will be coming back to patrol. They're not patrol officers on the street, but they'll be in a patrol function providing supervision and leadership within the district. So probably can't give you the exact numbers off the top of my head, but the idea is to take some of those folks who are in different jobs, and I'm not saying they're not desk jobs. I want to be clear on that. They're doing important work. I take nothing away from that, but we're saying those are officers who will be coming back to patrol. We look forward to using their talents and skills in their new positions. I think they're going to be a tremendous resource to the officers that are already out there, and I think we're going to see how it works out. But we also know that if things don't work out as well as we'd hoped, we'll make some more changes. I mean, this is part of the dynamic.
Chief, another thing with the downtown business district and then patrol on the outskirts, it's neighborhood residents that are worried and businesses, because basically you killed a division, and that division is being absorbed by another division, and patrol officers will go to the priority calls, and that's a huge area, from River all the way to 22nd, Campbell to Anklam, Greasewood area. So I know it's still working, but do you have any idea that, you know, we can tell the community how many more patrol officers will be on the outskirts of that business district every day patrolling?
Yeah, so I do want to clarify that, you know, I mean, I think that we are actually strengthening our commitment to downtown by establishing this particular patrol district, or section, perhaps would be better to say, within a district. I don't think that commitment to the downtown area is going away at all. In fact, I think it's going to be strengthened. But what we're going to be doing is looking at neighborhoods throughout the city, not just around downtown, although certainly you're right, there are some in the downtown area, but throughout the city that perhaps need more attention because of crime patterns, because of quality of life issues, because of traffic needs, whatever it is. And so I think some of those neighborhoods certainly are around the downtown, and they will be getting more attention. As we make our deployments with this new patrol configuration, there will be more officers assigned to those particular neighborhoods. But right now, we're trying to figure out where those areas are throughout the city that may need more attention. And we're going to do that looking at crime data, looking at calls for service, looking at neighborhood concerns, and then we'll probably be adjusting things as we go. So I think the model that we're proposing actually ends up providing better service throughout the community to areas that need it the most.
Okay, and part of that business district, the patrol, about 30, walk and bike. Are some of those patrol, or is it the squad cars around that will be giving security to the mayor and at council meetings? And how many of those?
So sure, some of the, I think that makes sense anyway, because that's part of the downtown. So we'll be utilizing some of those folks as needed for various security details or functions. The mayor's actually been very open about whatever he can do to help us have more officers available to interact with the public. He's been very open to that. I think we can get very creative about how officers are used to do different assignments as needed downtown. But I think the net result is that we're going to be able to provide very good service to our constituents there, and we're going to be keeping our ear to the ground. If they're seeing a reduction or a problem, we'll make the adjustments we need to on the fly. But I think neighborhoods throughout the city are actually going to be maybe a little surprised, but certainly pleased about how we are now matching the needs of their areas with the resources that are appropriate. And by transferring some of these officers, I think it gives us at least a starting point in terms of the flexibility to do that.
And how much better will response time be? You mentioned with more on patrol, it'll better response time. What is it now, and what do you want to see it at?
Yeah, so I don't know the answer to that question yet. I think that remains to be seen. I think our goal is to improve and have more consistent response times throughout the city. I don't think just because you live in one particular neighborhood, you should have to wait much longer than somebody who lives in another area. But what are we able to do in terms of response times? In what situations should we maybe look at some alternative response mechanisms? I think all of these are things that I'm excited. We have a great group of captains who are running these districts, and I have a lot of confidence in their skills and ability to match the way we provide services to the needs of their particular areas. I mean, this is a theme you're going to hear from me over and over again, which is I think neighborhoods within the city, any city, have different needs, and what we need to do as a police department is be responsive to those different needs. So I'm going to be putting a lot of confidence and expectations on my captains to figure out how we configure our personnel and what we do to provide the kind of service you're talking about.
Another sort of nitty-gritty question. The motor officers who are moving from traffic to the divisions, are they still going to be focused on traffic enforcement duties? Or are they going to be doing that as part of everything else?
No. They're very much going to be focused on traffic. But look, this is this idea, for example, having traffic officers assigned to geographic areas, this is not some radical concept. This is being done in cities all over the country because different areas of any city have different traffic needs. You go to some areas, the focus is very much on, for example, bike and pedestrian safety based on what's going on in certain neighborhoods. In other areas, the problem is chronic speeders, or maybe you have a concentration of establishments where folks are coming after they've been drinking and you need more DUI enforcement. Different areas require different needs. And so our traffic officers are going to remain very engaged in traffic, and we hope they're going to be working very closely with the sector officers so we can step up our level of traffic enforcement and engagement for all of our patrol personnel. I mean, I'm a big fan of police officers as really solid generalists. And I think that in order to be effective as a good generalist, you have to be well-trained, you have to have responsibility for a particular area, you have to get the right kind of resources and supervision, and you have to get the proper, you have to be seen as a really valuable member of the organization. And that's what I want to do with our patrol folks. I think they are at the core of what we do, and I want to provide them with the resources they need to do their jobs. So I don't know about you, but I think I'm about questioned out at this point. And sure, one more.
Okay, of the $14 million, 14.5 in savings, then you list about $7 million in need.
Yes.
So is that coming from the 14.5?
It is.
So
We're
$7.
basically what I've talked about with the city manager is, look, if we can come up with this kind of savings, we need essentially what would be called, a rebate of sorts around certain kinds of functions to actually be able to do the work we got to do. And he's been very receptive to that. So that's where you're seeing money coming from for cars, for uniforms, for technology, for training, is out of that savings. It's kind of like, look, if I can get you to help me with this level of savings, here's what I'm willing to work with you to push back to the department so you can provide the services and give your cops the resources they need. And that's the crux of the plan. I think that, in fact, it's a great question to end this with, because you've wrapped your arms around essentially what we're doing, which is we found these savings and we're taking a portion of that and reinvesting that so we can provide the best possible services and look to the future as we gradually grow the department.
How much assurance do you have you'll get that plow
I
back?
hope so. What's that?
How much assurance do you have you'll get that plow back?
I'm pretty confident. I mean, ultimately, the decision is not mine to make, but I think this is something that all of the city department heads have worked really hard on with the manager over a period of days. Everybody's involved in the same kind of process. It's not just the police department that's been engaged in this difficult budget discussion. I think there's a very good likelihood that it'll happen, but I acknowledge the decisions ultimately around the money are up to the city council. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Chief.
All right.